Welcome to our broadcast tonight. Chinese dissident and author Harry Wu will be here. Also, Chicago Symphony Music Director Daniel Barenbaum. And on Martin Luther King Day, one of those people closest to Dr. King in the Civil Rights Movement, Andrew Young. He later served as ambassador to the UN, as a congressman and mayor of Atlanta. We begin with Harry Wu. This past weekend, the president of China told a congressional delegation that the Chinese are going to make an extra effort to meet American concerns about China's human rights record. Harry Wu knows firsthand about human rights abuses. He has written a new book, which is called Bitter Winds. It chronicles the horrors of his forced labor in the Chinese gulag, an imprisonment that an estimated millions of people still endure. We're pleased to have him here. Welcome. Great to have you. This is an extraordinary story because it is a story of someone born to comfort in China, who later had to suffer some of the most extraordinary indignities that someone can suffer as a human being, in terms of the imprisonment, in terms of not knowing how you're going to be there, in terms of every kind of suffering and torture that one could go. Tell me what life was like before 1957 so we can appreciate, the whole arc of your life.
Chinese Communist Party have a very simple target. Abolish these people in the bourgeois class or landlord class. So I belong to the bourgeois class because my father is a banker. So in 1957, they labeled me as a counter-revolution rightist.
Because you'd done what?
Because I criticized Soviet invasion in Hungary. I criticized Chinese violation the human rights.
At the invitation of the party, because the party was trying to draw out those people who might be critical of the party.
Yeah, at the beginning they said, well, we will not blame you. We'll just take your words as a warning, as a trick. And 1 million of them put in the trick. And I'm one of them. I'm 20 years old students.
Yeah. How old were you at that time?
20 years.
Yeah. You were 20-year-old?
Yeah, 20 years old.
Yeah. And what happened then?
And then under civilian, and then later arrested, put in the labor camp, forced labor camp, sentenced to life. Under the police to go through the hard labor and reform yourself, so-called brainwashing. Chinese have a very simple regulation. How you become a criminal? Because you have so many landlord class idea, bourgeois idea. So we punish you in the camp, not only for punishment, but also as an opportunity we use the communism idea to reform you through the hard labor, 12 hours, 14 hours a day in the coal mine, in the industrial camp, in the farm, And we want to reform you, become a new socialist people. That means you have to give up your political viewpoints, you have to commit your crime, you have to give up your religious behavior, morality, totally become a new socialist people to fix in communism society.
Yeah. Tell me about how you endured even the early years, and it got worse, but how do you learn how to survive under the circumstances of what you have compared to a Soviet gulag?
Okay, in Chinese camp, there's a more important political function is thought reform, brainwashing. The only way to survive, turn yourself into a beast. If you always think about yourself as a human, you are concerned about your freedom, your future, your family, your sex, wrong and right, that causes a big suffering to you. But you turn yourself as a beast, that was quite simple.
And what does it mean to turn yourself into a beast?
Because the beast never have a feeling, never have an emotion, only thinking about grab the food from anywhere,
survival.
Anyone, survive.
Yeah, and no respect for anybody. You'll
no
steal,
suffering.
you'll do whatever you can to satisfy your own basic needs.
Yeah, right. That's easy to survive.
How'd you learn to do that?
Step by step. I learned from these common criminals because I'm hungry. more important suffering thing in Chinese camp is starvation. The starvation not only comes from your empty stomach, also comes from your brain. This kind physically or also is a spiritual torture is endless. And most of people cannot imagine what is that. And you turn yourself like a beast. If you can't find the rats in the field, you find a snake in front of frogs, just use the teeth, bit off the head of the rats and eat it, and you can survive.
There came a time in which you tried to send a letter to Chairman Mao protesting your imprisonment. And you obviously did that with the help of other people in the effort to get that letter out, but you were caught. And what happened?
Because we crossed the forbidden line, and they put me in a 3 feet wide, 3 feet high, 6 feet long, cement-made solitary confinement.
Like a coffin?
Like a coffin, cement coffin,
right.
Not made by wood. Yeah. By the regulation, the beginning 3 days, no food. And no, of course, there is no blankets over there. And I'm closing to death. The one thing you can get out is you have to confess. You have to surrender. But I cannot betray other people. So I think maybe the best way for me is stop to eat. But the Chinese police said, well, we consider about the revolutionary human rights. We will not let you dead. So they forced a rubber tube through my nose to my stomach to feeding you, and you never.
They didn't want you to die.
Yeah.
But that left permanent damage to your nostrils.
Yes, until today, still bleeding.
Yeah.
And you know, when the rubber pull out, all of the blood come out with it.
What happened then? When did you finally find yourself able to go back, to go home?
That's happened in 1979, after 90 years. Chinese communists face a very terrible situation. Deng Xiaoping come to the power. They have to find out, release most of these old political prisoners. It's already 20 years ago, because they face a new situation. There's so many new enemy in front of them. I got the release. But many inmates pass away, turn into ashes. They become nameless, faceless, voiceless people. Nobody.
You say the heroes are those that died rather than those that survived?
No, I'm not a hero.
But how about those that died? Do you think they're heroes? Those who refused to bend and died?
Not really. They're suffering, and they cannot keep themselves. At that time, the death will be better than life, so they chose the death. I try.
To die?
Try to die.
Yeah. You got home, and what was life like with your family, and what had happened to them?
I found my mother was passed away. I didn't know. He was committing suicide.
She'd committed suicide?
Because he's so scared. I was arrested, put in a camp, disappointed. But the family have to tell the police my mother was dead in a heart attack, because committing suicide also is a crime in China. It means you are using the death to count against the party. And my father was beaten and tortured, lost all the belongings, and my brother is also killed because he is a member of the counter-revolution family.
Yeah. Your father's last words to you were what?
He say, I make a terrible mistake. Suppose I have to leave the country in 1949 when communists come to the power. The whole family was destroyed by my mistake. And don't stay here, leave.
So
this
you
is
did.
not the place.
How did you get out?
I came here, got an invitation from UC Berkeley as a research fellow. So I came to the United States legally. My major is geology. But later I think I have to tell the story, tell the truth. Many inmates pass away. They cannot come here to tell the story. And the nightmares never left me, you know. And even today, I still, all these things always in front of me. I cannot turn my back on them. I can't. And the whole world have to realize the people of the world condemn Gulag, denounce the concentration camp. China have the same Laogai system, Laoga, Laogai. Laogai means forced labor camps in China. And 50 million people pass away, and today there's a 10 million still over there.
And you're saying the product of that forced labor is being sold to American companies, whether it's tea or other products that American companies are supporting the system by buying the products. Let me stay with your life, though, for a second. So you come back and you decide you've got to do something, and so you then decide to go back and to risk your life and to risk the lives of people who might help you to make a documentary record of the abuses that are taking place in the People's Republic of China.
Yes. I went back in 1991 twice.
Yes.
Most of my old camp I went back to visit.
Wait, what year was it?
In 1991.
91, right. I thought you said 91.
I posed as an American businessman, make a deal with the police manager to find out the products, find a way to sell it to the United States. Industrial products like steel pipe, diesel engine, machine tools, hand tools, and agricultural products.
Now, did you use a pseudonym?
Yes.
You did, because they would obviously have known you from the records. Yeah. Take a look at this. This is, this had appeared on 60 Minutes in 1991 with Ed Bradley, but here is a clip from the hidden camera that you took back to document those abuses that somehow you felt like you had to go and show. Here it is.
I was under the watchtower, under electricity barbed wire, under the police automatic weapon, almost 20 years. I know very well. The communists almost destroyed my whole life. My whole life was good. Even I'm suffering in China, this still is my country. Survive as a beast.
As you watched that, you said you'd still be there. You're just lucky that you're not.
If I still be there, Cherry, you would never meet me over here. I'm very lucky I can come out, and I survived from there.
As you know, the president has set certain conditions and improvement in human rights before he will grant most favored nation status to the People's Republic of China. And as I mentioned in the introduction, a congressional delegation has met with Chinese officials who promised some progress on that. Do you believe that they genuinely will change and that pressure from the United States or the withholding of certain trading privileges will cause them to change these political abuses?
I don't believe it.
Why not?
First of all, I want to ask, what is the human rights abuse in China? What mean the improvements of the human rights record? It's only release a few well-known dissidents? Doesn't mean anything. I hope President Clinton becomes the first world leader. America becomes the first country in the world condemn there is a Gulag system in China, condemn Laogai. We know it. There is a system killing the people.
Now, do all of those people who have relationships with the Chinese leadership also know whether they are, former President Bush is in China now with Brent Scowcroft as National Security Advisor?
They knew it, but they don't want to do that.
They don't want to raise the question in the same way that
because
Americans didn't raise the question with Stalin.
They have a business relation with them. They have an investment over there. They have their own interest over there. So they didn't tell the truth.
What do you think caused things to change?
China is on the way to change. The recently 10 years have a big change. There's a big opportunities over there. But the autocracy system is still over there. And this is the key problem. We cannot do any, I don't think the American businessman, the Japanese businessman have to realize the capitalist system never can be expanding under a communism dictatorship. This is a terrible situation.
You can't have political totalitarianism in a free market economy.
Never combine together. If they not realize that, there's a taken risk. Yeah. There's a very big risk.
Of course, the Chinese look to what happened to the Soviet Union and say, see what happened? If you open up your society politically, you'll have the same kind of thing that happened to the Soviet Union. What we're trying to do is open it up economically while maintaining the political control so that we don't end up like the Soviet Union in collapse.
Yeah. Tell the Chinese leader, you want the money? You have to improve your human rights.
Well, that's what they're saying, isn't it? I mean, that seems to be the attitude of the government, of the Clinton administration, even though he's less tough today than he was during the campaign.
Yeah, they say about that, but I want to ask the question: what is the key question in the human rights? What is that? Not only release a few well-known dissidents, that's not enough. We have to look at the system.
Yeah. What is the attitude of the Chinese government today vis-a-vis you? What efforts, what connection, what communication, what have they done, in other words, to show their displeasure of what you have done and the fact that you're out front talking about these human rights abuses and talking about a Chinese gulag?
Of course, they hate me.
I know that, but you can live with that.
Yes, they hate me a long time ago, 3 decades ago. Yeah. So what? I have to tell the truth. I have to walk tall, stand. I have to. My experience, my family experience, not belong to me. Belong to Chinese history. Also belong to human rights, human beings society. If we cannot stand up, I just want to tell all my fellow countrymen, all of the Chinese around the world, we have to stand straight, walk tall, say no to Laogai, say no to communist dictatorship. We have to do that. And then the world can stand together with us to promote our country to a new, very good situation, freedom.
Do you think of yourself and do you see yourself as a kind of Chinese Solzhenitsyn?
I don't know, but I survive. I think I have the responsibility to not only my country, also to the world, to tell the truth. Okay. And my story is not belong to me. I hope one day the people realize that.
And your message to them, which you gave to me earlier, is to unite and to stand straight and walk tall, as you said, and say no to human rights abuses and say no to the repression of individual thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you.
Harry Wu, written with Carolyn Wakeman, a memoir, Bitter Winds, a memoir of my years in China's gulag. A lot of people in the human rights movement have praised this story and this triumph, at least from one individual, over imprisonment and enormous torture. Thank you very much, Harry Wu. We'll be right back. Daniel Barenboim is here. Also, Andy Young, remembering the legacy of Martin Luther King. Stay with us. As a child prodigy, Daniel Barenboim gave his first professional piano concert at the ripe old age of 7, and a series of successful international debuts followed. When he began to conduct as well in the 1960s, proved his brilliance in 2 careers. The son of Russian immigrants living in Argentina and Israel, he currently leads the Berlin Staatsoper in a reunified Germany. When Sir George Solti stepped down as the music director of the great Chicago Symphony Orchestra in 1991, the baton was passed from George to Daniel, and we're pleased to have him here now. Welcome.
Thank you very much.
Great. Boy, we're doing a lot on the Chicago Symphony Orchestra. We had Sir George here when he was honored at the Kennedy Center Honors for an hour, and so it's a pleasure to. Tell me, there's been a lot of change in your life over the last 3 or 4 years. How is that going? I mean, how is inheriting that mantle from Solti going?
Well, you know what it is. The great orchestras have very often had the chance to work with great conductors, and great conductors had the chance to work with great orchestras. And therefore, it's in the end very difficult to say whether the Chicago Symphony is what it is because of George Solti, or George Solti is what he is because of the Chicago Symphony. When it works, as was the case there, it is a bit of both. So this is really what is difficult to follow. It's not only that he is a great conductor, but it is the long time that he spent developing them and they developing him in a healthy situation. But I think this transition period is over. Now that I'm coming to, I'm halfway through my third season, and we sort of establish, I suppose, what you would call our new identity.
And what is that?
There are basically three elements in music that are important: rhythm, melody, and harmony in tonal music. And each musician has obviously a list of priorities. And in some cases, one is more important than the other. I feel that there is a very clear base to making music, and that is that sound is not something that is irrelevant. Sound is something that once you set a piece of music in motion, it doesn't only follow your will, but it follows some kind of physical laws which are determined also by the harmony. And this is basically, if you want in 2 words, my credo about music making, this is what it is, which means that everybody is not only concerned with how he plays, but where he is at every given moment in the piece, and he listens to everybody.
Sometimes people will say, and some conductors believe, that an orchestra has a sound. Do you?
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
I would very much hope so.
Yeah. But you know what I mean.
Yes.
It's so
Yes.
that's what a conductor can do.
Yes.
Can give it and change it.
Yeah.
And are you changing the sound of the Chicago Symphony because you are a different conductor, and therefore that's what the imprint is?
In a certain way, certainly in certain repertoire.
Yeah.
You know, in some areas of the repertoire, I would think the sound is very similar. In others, it is very different, you know.
When you thought about taking this job, was it automatic? Did you say, this is a great collection of musicians, I have followed George Solti before, I will follow him now, when you took over in Paris?
I first conducted the Chicago Symphony in 1969 or 1970, so, you know, I was a very young man.
Right.
And for me, this was absolutely the highest quality imaginable. And I developed with them through the 70s a very close relationship as a guest conductor, and it was always at the back of my mind that one day I would like to end up there on a more permanent basis. So when the call came, you can imagine not only how happy I was, proud even, but what an impulse it gave me to want to work more.
Yeah. The reason I ask is that you had a great quote in some magazine in which you said, the Chicago Symphony Orchestra can only go downhill.
That's right, that's right.
Because it was so good,
Yeah.
you know, but clearly you believed otherwise. I mean, you believed that you could make it different, not better or worse, different,
Yes.
right?
Yes. Well, I had the experience of being able to make it different even when I came as a guest conductor for a few weeks. And so the difference is that now I try to make that difference a more permanent one.
Yeah. How hard is it, though? I mean, do you have the critics out there carping at you because it's not Solti? I mean, you know, there's an old notion in America that what you want to do when somebody great precedes you is not to follow immediately the person, but follow the person who succeeds the person who's great.
I don't find it difficult. I find one of the more obvious qualities of the Chicago Symphony is its flexibility.
Yeah.
It doesn't play in a given way for no matter who stands there. It is able to adapt itself to many, many different conductors. And therefore, I don't find it hard. I feel very much at home there, and I feel very often everybody at one with me on the stage. And this is really what counts. It doesn't count that, I mean, if I'm a professional conductor and there are professional musicians, that I will do something and they will follow me. That's really any professional conductor with any professional orchestra should be able to do that. Yeah. The real satisfaction of music making for a conductor is when the musicians feel what he feels at that moment and are able to produce it.
That's the satisfaction.
That's right.
If you can somehow communicate to that group of musicians to feel if I can somehow reach inside of me and connect to you, my feelings, then you have succeeded.
That's right.
Yeah. Why Berlin? Why that assignment? Because you spend half of your time there.
Well, Berlin at the moment, of course, is one of the most fascinating cities in the world.
Because of the political dynamic or what?
Because of the whole process of reunification. I mean, you've heard just before I came on about many of the terrible evils of the totalitarian system. I don't want to make comparisons, but a certain amount of
political repression existed in East Germany. Right.
Very much so. East Germany, of course, East Germany was a very special case because it went down politically, it went down economically, as we all know, but culturally it had a lot to offer. It kept the best of German culture intact. Culture served another purpose in that country, as I believe it serves under every totalitarian system.
And that is what?
That is that this is where people escape to. They are not allowed to travel. They are not allowed to think many of the things that they can.
They're not allowed other freedoms.
They are not allowed other freedoms, but they can escape. Music and culture becomes an escape.
Yeah, and therefore I would assume, because wasn't Kurt Masur in Berlin? Wasn't he in
Leipzig.
Germany? In Leipzig, that's right. And during the regime of the communist regime, when the old
You see, the difference is that when you used to go in the subway in Moscow, or Moscow as an example, in old Soviet days, people would read Dostoevsky and Tolstoy and all that. And you know, now they read Playboy magazine.
Yes.
That's basically the difference.
So there is freedom. Is it good? Is freedom good?
This is a big question mark.
Well, here's the other question. China. Any great orchestras come out of China?
Not yet, but
why not? I mean,
I think that Western music
has some great Chinese musicians.
Yes, but Western music hasn't really has its roots there. You know, Western music as we know it is a very recent phenomenon. It only has existed really as we know it for 200 or 300 years. It's the youngest of all the arts.
Right. And
it's the same thing in Japan. Japan has produced many great musicians, but Western music really penetrated there only at the beginning of the century. I think the Beethoven Ninth Symphony was played there for the first time during the First World War.
Is that right?
If I'm not mistaken. And now you have 50 or 60 performances of the Ninth Symphony only in the week between Christmas and New Year in Tokyo.
They love American musical figures. I mean, American culture figures in Japan. I mean, Michael Crichton was here and he was telling me a story about Steven Spielberg. You know, that Steven Spielberg is a hero in Japan, the filmmaker. And certainly Michael Jackson played to, you know, enormous crowds in terms of popular culture. The other assignment you've had since you and I have gotten to know it, you were also at the Paris Opera, right? And what happened there?
I was fired before I started. That's what happened. I was you know, the Paris Opera, the building, the new building and the new idea of the Bastille Opera for many years, and I really wanted to do. In fact, I wanted to do there what I'm doing in Berlin now.
Yeah, which is to do what? To build,
to make really the right balance between tradition on the one hand and experimentation on the other hand. In other words, you must have the baggage from the past, all you have learned, and build on that something new every day, and not just mechanical repetition. And for me, in the opera world, that means treating every discipline in the opera with the same degree of importance. I don't want the public to come to the Staatsoper in Berlin because there is a great conductor, because there's a great orchestra, or because there is great singers, or because there's a stage director. I want them to come because of all those things put together to produce one form of art.
And so they fired you before you had a chance to do that.
That's right.
Now, do you care?
No.
I didn't think so.
No. Frankly, no.
I mean, it's nothing that you really lost any sleep over at the time.
Oh, I did lose sleep over it at the time, of course.
Yeah.
Of course, it's not a very pleasant thing. I don't know whether you've ever been fired, but it's not very nice.
Yes.
It's not very nice.
Of course I have.
I mean, there are nicer things.
Yeah, but then you quickly realize that you can not only...
Yes. And, you know, and I had I mean, I had already accepted the position in Chicago, so I was, as it were, waiting for that, because it was in the transition period. It was between 89 and 91. But it gave me in those 2 years the opportunity to conduct very often, much more often than I would have with the Berlin Philharmonic, and go on tour with them, which was a source of great satisfaction for me. And then it gave me the possibility and the opportunity to take over the Staatsoper and live in this really very, very exciting moment in Germany.
So you spend part of your time in Chicago, part of your time in Berlin, and where else?
With you.
With just come in to see.
I travel very little
Yes.
outside of those two.
Those two back and forth.
And I
between
spend the summers in Bayreuth.
Yeah.
That I always have.
You've always done that, haven't you?
Yeah.
And that has a real connection to Wagner, does it not?
That's right.
Yeah.
This is only Wagner. It is a festival that has existed since 1876, devoted exclusively to the works of Richard Wagner.
And you have been forthrightly talking that Israeli Philharmonic and other orchestras in Israel should play Wagner.
Well, other orchestras have played Wagner.
Yeah.
No, there's a
It's only the
small
Philharmonic
orchestra.
that hasn't.
The Philharmonic hasn't played
And
either.
Zubin Mehta, your good friend, is also in favor of it, is he not?
Absolutely, he tried to. We both tried, both unsuccessfully. But I'm sure he will succeed in the end.
He will.
Yes, because it is a subject which is has to be clarified. In other words, it's not that Wagner was anti-Semitic, which is stopping them from playing it. Everybody knew that Wagner had been anti-Semitic.
Right.
It is the association of Wagner with the cultural image of the Third Reich, and this association is very strong in people's minds. There are people who saw their families taken to the concentration camps to the sound of Wagner's music, and they cannot bear to listen to that. And I think one has to respect that. On the other hand, one has to respect that there are other people who do not have these associations, and they should have the right to hear this music. And that's why it was my recommendation that the Israel Philharmonic should play Wagner, but it should not play it in a subscription program where people who have this association might fear that. But if a concert is announced outside of the subscription, where you have to go and buy yourself a single ticket for this concert, you know what you're going for.
You once said that every conductor, that it's essential to any conductor to understand, maybe understand is not the right word, maybe a better word, Mozart and Wagner. You
Well,
remember?
for opera, there are three composers that are the pillars of the operatic literature, and that's Mozart, Verdi, and Wagner. And if you want to conduct opera, you have to come to terms with those three.
And coming to terms means what?
Coming to terms within the relationship between the text and the music, between the stage and the pit, and the combination not only of the meaning of the text, but the combination of the sound of the language with the sound of the music. And this is why what in America has now become so customary to have the surtitles allows you to perform the operas in the original language, which gives you a better idea of what the composer had in mind, and at the same time you understand. This is why I'm in great favor of that. I must say I'm in the minority in Germany because they don't believe in surtitles, because for many years they had the operas all played in German, and therefore the public is used to that, and they're used to concentrating on the stage, and they don't want to be distracted. And the problem of the surtitles, when they are not well done, is the timing, that if you get a funny line on the surtitle before the singer has actually said it, the public laughs before he has a chance to say it, and therefore the timing is all wrong. But when it is properly done, it can contribute a lot to the understanding of the public.
I've got to get this in. Now, you are playing tonight at Carnegie Hall for a private little thing, in a chamber music group, right? You believe chamber music is the purest form of music?
Absolutely.
Why?
Because the minute you have two notes, even on one instrument, that is already chamber music. Chamber music is about the relation between the sounds, not only between the people, between the sounds. And when you hear a piece of music, even of a huge orchestra, of a 100-member orchestra, when the Chicago Symphony plays a work of Richard Strauss or Mahler or Bruckner with 100 people on stage, and you hear the music walking around the orchestra from one group to the others, and how it starts in the clarinet and goes to the double basses and to the violins, back to the trombones. That's what chamber music is about. And this is why, in its purest form, it's the quartet or the duo or the trio.
You clearly have not become, now let me test this.
I'm listening to you.
You have not become as good a pianist, as you could if you didn't do all these other things, right?
I'm not sure.
I'm
not sure. I'm not sure. I might be even worse if I hadn't done all this.
Because they add to your musicality.
That's right.
Is that it?
That's absolutely. Piano playing is, in the end, only an expression of what is inside
Interpretation and
or what is
feeling.
inside you, yes.
Yeah.
Obviously, if you neglect the physical aspect of what is so-called technique, which is much more than just the mechanics, then obviously you can't do it.
Yeah.
But piano playing, as all form of instrumental playing, is only an expression of what is inside you. Therefore, the more you try and enrich yourself, the better chance you have to have more to express. And I don't really think I would play the piano better if I didn't do all that.
Yeah, maybe so. So I concede the point.
I got out of that one.
All right. The Barenboim gang is considered to be you and Zubin Mehta and it's like Perlman and who else?
Oh, I don't know. I never thought.
You
of
never
a
heard
gang.
that term?
Yes, I heard it.
Yeah, it's a group
I never
of
liked
Israeli musicians.
Well, that's not true. That's not true.
I have some connection to Israel. You don't like the term because
I don't like the term because I think that the
gang, or which don't you like, the Barenboim or the gang?
both. Both. I don't think it's good to mix the two. I think I have very good friends who are musicians who I don't make music with very gladly, and there are a few people I make music with great joy, and they're not my friends, and there are very few that combine the two, and for those I'm very happy, but I don't consider ourselves a gang.
Okay, but it's not my term. It's
No, I
some,
know,
you know, as you know.
I know.
Is great music being written and composed today? Great music.
You'd have to define to me first what is great music. What do you consider great music?
3/4 of what Mozart did.
No, you know.
No, I don't know. You help me out.
There are good composers. There are good composers. There are
well, there's Philip Glass. Is that
there are bad composers, mediocre composers, good composers, great composers, and there's Mozart. So I mean,
I know, right.
We can,
that's why I said
him,
3/4.
Yeah, that's
right.
Him we can forget about. No, music has been in a crisis situation for a long time. In fact, since after Wagner, because of the break with the tonal system, and all sorts of other avenues have been explored. Some explored and abandoned, others continued. But I believe that it is really sound which keeps the process going, and that we keep experimenting, and it doesn't matter if every piece is not a masterpiece. I think I like to do contemporary music because I know that out of so many pieces I might find one that will become great, or I might contribute to this composer writing great music in the future. After all, when you go to a museum, you don't only see masterpieces. You go and you see 10 pictures, maybe the 7th is a masterpiece.
Exactly.
And you see 6 that are not so great.
Right.
But people don't want
by
that
the same artist.
Right, and people don't have the same kind of patience in the concert hall, and I think they should.
Will you come back again?
Thank you
it's
very
always
much.
Great to see you.
Thank
it
you
really
very
is.
much.
I invited you back and you called, and it's just terrific to see you, and I hope we can do this again.
Thank you very much.
We'll provide an ongoing music lesson for me. Thank you, man.
Thank
Great.
you very much.
Pleasure. Continued success. We'll be right back. Andrew Young is here remembering Dr. Martin Luther King on this special day dedicated to him. Stay with us. In 1961, he went to Atlanta to work as a top assistant to Martin Luther King, Jr., and served as executive vice president of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference. After Reverend King's death, Andrew Young was elected 3 times to the United States Congress, resigning to become ambassador to the United Nations, and then he served 2 terms as mayor of Atlanta. He has just written his spiritual memoirs entitled A Way Out of No Way, and we welcome him here on the 65th anniversary of Dr. King's birth. Welcome, Andy. It's a pleasure to have you here.
Well, it's good to be here with you.
I want to talk about the spiritual memoirs in just a second, but let me first just talk about Dr. King, the observance. First, I want to talk about the observance and then about the legacy. How are we doing in terms of your measurement as a community of people in observing this giant American's birthday?
Well, I think we made a mistake in the observance from the beginning. We viewed it too much as a black holiday. And I think what we're seeing now, and particularly on this occasion, we're suddenly realizing that the thing that made Martin Luther King significant was not that he was a black hero or a black visionary, a prophet. It was that he had a message of nonviolence in a world that essentially was about to destroy itself with violence. Now we see that violent epidemic and we look around for voices who have something to say to us, and there we finally suddenly realize that whether you're black, white, blue, or brown, it doesn't make any difference. Martin Luther King has a message for the future, a message that helped the United States of America get through a very difficult time, a message that really can still help our families and the rest of the world.
How do we change it, though, this perception that you talk about? The New York Times said the holiday is, quote, widely observed by governments, mostly ignored by businesses, and in danger of being viewed as a black holiday rather than a national one. What's necessary to make sure that doesn't happen?
Well, I think that we have to take some responsibility for that as followers of Martin Luther King, and I think we gave in to the temptation of black pride very early. And the violent epidemic, though, which is sweeping the world in which we live, is one that suddenly reminds us that this is more than a black issue.
The legacy. Most people think of nonviolence. There have been biographies written now, two that come to mind, Taylor Branch and I think David Garrow. Was it David Garrow?
That's right.
Have they captured the essence of Martin Luther King and his legacy?
Well, I think that David Garrow in his original book came closer than he did in the second book. I think his big book, the first book, the FBI and Martin Luther King, he was on Martin Luther King's side.
Yes.
The second book, he kind of got seduced by the FBI. I think that Taylor Branch has done a
private life and all that stuff.
Yeah, Taylor Branch has done a much better job of getting behind the cultural, religious, social forces that helped to create Martin Luther King. And I think there was something on this week about Vernon Johns.
Yes.
And Vernon Johns as a predecessor of Martin Luther King. Vernon Johns is another one of those great preachers that never achieved the prominence of a Martin Luther King, but certainly paved the way at Dexter Avenue. And he was somebody that Martin always quoted and that Martin really loved. Putting Martin Luther King in the context of the development of the church and the development of social changes that were worldwide, I think were better accomplished by Taylor Branch.
But the message from King is not just nonviolence, but it is also spiritual.
It's spiritual. It's the message of the Old Testament that let justice roll down like waters and righteousness like a mighty stream from the prophet Amos. But it's also the message of forgiveness, of reconciliation, which comes from the New Testament, that we somehow have to accept the situation that we find ourselves in and not blame each other for it, but come together as brothers and change the situation. That's the message of nonviolence. And I think you see it very well acted out right now by Mandela and de Klerk in South Africa. That Mandela says, if we're going to have a new South Africa, there can't be any reprisals or revenge or recriminations. We've got to forget the past, move on, and create a new South Africa as brothers, in spite of the violence and bloodshed that occurred over centuries on the African continent, where whites against blacks. And I think because of that, they have a chance to make it.
But the lesson for us, though, in that is in terms of the conflict in our society today.
Well, let me go first of all to comparing that to Bosnia, where people nursed hatreds for centuries and then finally exploded the society and created now a disaster area in Yugoslavia, which was once a beautiful country. Northern Ireland continues to pull apart Protestants and Catholics. We're just now beginning to get Arabs and Israelis at least talking to each other. But in our society, I think we've got to understand that we have all of the volatility in America that you have in South Africa or that you have in Yugoslavia. And that Atlanta, for instance, could have been just like Beirut, Lebanon, or just like Sarajevo. Everybody black had guns. Everybody black had a reason to hate. But Martin said, that hate is too great a burden to bear. Mayor Hartsfield, the white mayor in the 50s, said Atlanta has to be a city too busy to hate. And we chose a path of love. And that's one of the reasons why we're such a thriving and prosperous city. Not that we've solved all the problems, but that by and large we made a commitment that nobody was going anywhere. We were going to stay here and work on them together. And we've done so with a significant degree of success, I think.
President Clinton made a speech in Memphis, as I know you may have been there, but you certainly know about, in which he said if Martin Luther King came back today, you know, he would say, this is not what my life was meant to do. This is not the legacy of my life, to see young black men shooting other young black men. What would be Dr. King's reaction and message, do you think, today?
Well, I think his reaction would be twofold. One, I think he would quote Victor Hugo, as he did when he was alive at the time of the violence in Los Angeles, that when men are placed in darkness, crimes will be committed. But the guilty are not just those who commit the crimes, but those who create the darkness. And I think he would, first of all, say that, yes, we can't blame the victims for the problem, that blacks are a victim of violence, that it wasn't the black community that destroyed the black family. It was the U.S. government that essentially was not able to provide jobs in an economy and that established a welfare policy that said if you're going to be on welfare, you can't have a man in the house. That we've had now 3 or 4 generations of that kind of policy that literally drove black men from their families as a result of government policy. That's one of the contributing factors. You've also had now a government that has been spending literally hundreds of billions of dollars each year as a government on weapons of death and destruction, saying that violence is the pathway to security. Then you've got a private sector through its music, through its movies, now through its video games, that's saying over and over again the way to solve problems is to wipe out your enemy. Finally, you've got a music industry that is allowing people and putting significant money, but maybe more important, or the part of the establishment that most directly affects the black urban environment is the presence of guns, of handguns. And I don't know anybody black that manufactures a gun. And yet our country is flooded with weapons. So we are victims of a society that is based on violence. Now, even as he would say that, he would say that we can't just sit back and accept it, just like we didn't sit back and accept racism. Yes, we are the victims. We don't have to take the blame, though, but we do have to take the responsibility, and that we have to do something. And I ran across a quotation in Baltimore the other day from a former nun that talked about the need for random deeds of kindness and senseless acts of beauty. That we've got to reclaim the capacity to love. We've got to be willing to forgive in our families. Even, you know, it's one of the ironies of human behavior that I never hated the Ku Klux Klan. I never lost my temper with the Ku Klux Klan. I have lost my temper with my younger brother. I have lost my temper with my wife. I've lost my temper with my son, not my daughters, but my son. And the closer you are and the more intimately you are involved, the more difficult it is to be nonviolent. And so if we're going to have a less violent world, we can start it at home. And it's because it's learning to disagree without being disagreeable.
It seems to me, though, that too many communities have allowed one sector of the population in America, sometimes from the right, to suggest in America, the right has been suggesting for a while in America about the primacy of the family and all of that, that the more moderate and progressive people are just coming to talk about that, and they allowed the right to co-opt a notion of the family and its place at the essence of our social structure and its place as a contributor to the qualities you're talking about.
Well, yeah, but I think we were still talking about something different. I have always felt that the importance of the primacy of the family, but I always saw that it wasn't this man and this woman who was splitting. It was a society that generated unemployment, that chose not to build housing that might create jobs, but to build weapons. It was government policy that said that if a man is unemployed, if the woman is going to qualify for child support for the children, the man can no longer be in the house. That we have tried to help people to see that, for instance, a government that prevents sex education, a government that denies low-income women the right to choose about whether or not they're going to have children and have intelligent either family planning or abortion rights. That was government policy that helped to create the environment that destroyed the family. And what we've said is that you can't blame the victims. You've got to change the total environment. But you've got to change the total environment in order to give the family the job security, the educational opportunity, and a climate where it can survive.
Let me talk about your book just a second. A Way Out of No Way, The Spiritual Memoirs of Andrew Young. Why do you call it the spiritual memoirs?
I don't know, because people look at the civil rights movement, they look at me as a political person.
Who's an ordained minister.
And yet nothing good happened to me until I made peace with God. And when I understood that I was a child of God and that maybe God had a purpose for my life, all of a sudden everything began to fall into place. And the successes that I've had in association with Martin Luther King, in association with Jimmy Carter, here lately with the Olympics, all of those were things which, first of all, everybody thought they were not possible. My parents pleaded with me not to leave my job in New York at the National Council of Churches and go to work with Martin Luther King. They got their good friends in Montgomery to call me and just tell me that this movement wasn't going to go anywhere and that I should stay in New York with the National Council of Churches, where I would have a good job and some security for my family. And yet, the best thing that ever happened to me was teaming up with Martin Luther King.
Well, finally, what made Martin Luther King a great man?
I think that's what made him a great man, was the same spirit that I am trying to describe in my life. I think I saw him follow in his life, even when he knew it meant his death.
A Way Out of No Way, The Spiritual Memoirs of Andrew Young, who's served the country as a congressman, as UN ambassador, was at the forefront of the civil rights movement, mayor of Atlanta, continues to play a prominent public role and a private role in the future of his city and in making as a public citizen. It's always great to see you, Andy, and I thank you for sharing those thoughts on this day. Look forward to seeing you in Atlanta sometime, which is...
Very good.
Thank you. We thank you for joining us on this time. Look forward to seeing you next time.